Northern Scotland -3 or -4 Celsius first thing. Then an area of rain moves into Scotland, Northern England, Northern Ireland. As it bumps into the cold air, we can expect some snow above 400 or 500 metres for central and northern Scotland. The rain elsewhere replaced by showers. It's staying blustery through Thursday, but the gales ease and the showers will be interspersed by some brighter spells. However, it turns increasingly windy for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland as we end Thursday. Gales or severe gales for the Northern Irish coast, pushing into Western Scotland and then the Irish Sea coast during the hours of darkness. And the early hours of Friday will see rain replaced by showers, a blustery night, but with the wind, of course, temperatures will stay above frost levels for most. 8 Celsius in the south, 3 or 4 in the north. A bright start, despite it being a bit colder in the south compared with Thursday morning. And it looks like there'll be sunny spells coming through by Friday afternoon across much of England, Wales, eastern Scotland, Northern Ireland eventually. But there'll be further showers, especially for western Scotland, northwest England and parts of Wales. Now into the weekend, rain on Saturday will be replaced by showers on Sunday and it'll turn colder.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Hey, welcome along to Wednesday's edition of the Mark Steyn Show. We have a stellar lineup of stories and guests for you as ever, and you will not want to miss a single second. Coming up, as Shamima Begum is given a 10-part podcast by the BBC. Extremism seemingly rears its ugly head in the knife attack in Paris earlier today, and an old ISIS video resurfaces. We'll be digging into this with international security expert Will Geddes and asking, is Britain safe? And a London primary school called the Sir Francis Drake School has voted to change its name after the governing body decided the slave trade links with its title did not align with the values of the school. We'll be chatting about this with former MEP and political commentator Patrick O'Flynn. It's just the latest round of woke madness. Plus, the ONS has revealed that excess deaths in 2022 were some of the highest seen since the aftermath of the Second World War. And apparently, it's not because of COVID. Later, we'll be dissecting this with The Spectator's data editor Michael Simmons, and is studying maths until you're 18, straight out of China's playbook. That's right. Well, that's Spectator columnist Zoe Scrimple's take on Rishi Sunak's big plan for the UK. She's received a lot of backlash for it. Zoe will be joining us in the studio later to talk through this. Not quite explain herself, but explain what she's getting on about, I think, now. And as always, we'll bring you the stories that matter most to you. But we can't forget, can we? The most important part of the show, ladies and gentlemen, where you get to give me a right good pummeling. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Ask me anything, please. Pummel me. I'm contracted to have to say that. That's all coming up, but now it's the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you and good evening to you. Rishi Sunak has promised to reduce the NHS waiting list and tackle illegal migration in his first political broadcast as Prime Minister. Mr Sunak promised hard-headed common sense in approaching the migration issue. He also blamed the pandemic for creating backlogs in the health service, but promised not to let down those on the waiting list. He also said he'd taken difficult but fair decisions to get borrowing and debt under control.
The government's priorities are your priorities, the people's priorities. Together, we're putting your needs above politics to repair the economy, strengthen our NHS, tackle illegal migration, and restore pride in the United Kingdom, our great country.
Well, earlier today, the NHS waiting time and the threat of strikes dominated the first PMQs of the year. The Prime Minister quizzed the opposition leader on why he wasn't supporting the government's proposed minimum safety legislation, which seeks to ensure a minimum standard of service by key workers during strike action. Sir Keir Starmer responded by saying that if Rishi Sunak had negotiated with NHS workers earlier, they wouldn't be on strike in the first place.
In Australia and Canada and the US, they ban strikes on blue light services. We're not doing that. All we're saying is that in these emergency services, patients should be able to rely on a basic level of life-saving care. Why is he against that, Mr. Speaker?
He's not promising that people would get to see a doctor in a few days, like they did under Labour. He's not promising that cancer patients would get urgent treatment, as they did under Labour. He's not even promising an NHS that puts patients first, like it did under Labour. No, he's promising that one day, although we can't say when, their record-high waiting list will stop growing.
The Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen has had the whip removed after he shared a tweet comparing the COVID vaccine's after-effects on cardiac health with the Holocaust. The Chief Whip, Simon Hart, said Mr Bridgen had crossed a line and that misinformation about the vaccine caused harm and cost lives. The Prime Minister's also called the comments utterly unacceptable. A 22-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after the shooting of a woman on Merseyside on Christmas Eve. 26-year-old Elle Edwards was killed at a pub in Wallasey, but she wasn't believed to be the intended target of the attack. A 23-year-old woman has also been arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. The Foreign Minister has called for the immediate release of a British-Iranian national due to be executed by Iran. Ali Reza Akbari, a former senior defence official, was reportedly arrested in 2019 for spying for British intelligence. James Cleverly has called his planned execution a politically motivated act by a barbaric regime that has total disregard for human life. That's the news. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB Plus radio. You're with GB News. Back now to Mark Steyn with Patrick Christus.
I can't help but worry whether or not we're sleepwalking into a terror attack. Whilst it's a great thing that we haven't had a large-scale attack for a good number of years now, it also makes me a bit nervous. Today it emerged that ISIS republished a video of London with the words "coming soon." We should all be very concerned about this. ISIS used to release videos before attacks back in 2017, a year in which it seemed terror attacks happened pretty much every single week. Just a couple of days ago, the Taliban basically put a fatwa on Prince Harry by saying that he should stand trial for war crimes after he announced his kill number. It doesn't matter which way that utter numpty tries to dress it up about how the right-wing media are the ones who put his family at risk. Critics, of course, say that he's put people in danger thanks to his own desire to get something off his chest, i.e. his kill number. So we've got a member of the royal family who can afford to walk around with armed guards, detailing his combat background. The Taliban call him out for it. A couple of days later, ISIS issue a video appearing to hint that they're going to attack London soon. And our state broadcaster, the BBC, decides it's a good idea to do a 10-part podcast with Shamima Begum so she can try and rehabilitate her image. Talking of imagery, given that it's a podcast and not a video documentary, it'll be very difficult for us to tell whether or not she's ditched the burqa for the old baseball cap and lipstick again, won't it? We all saw through that, didn't we? Here is a woman who looked at videos of people being beheaded, suicide bombers, etc., and thought, I want some of that. Now, the BBC are giving her the chance to try to convince everyone that she's just a normal girl. I'm still Shamima from the block. At the very least, she's thick as mints, and not someone who should be allowed back into Britain based, frankly, on that alone. But of course, the BBC podcast series will reignite the debate now about whether or not we can rehabilitate jihadi scumbags. And then people like me will be called racist for not wanting someone who literally joined a depraved terror cult to come back into this country and live off benefits for the rest of her life in a council tax, in a council house even, leeching off the British taxpayer and laughing about what a soft touch we all are. All the while this is going on, we're just willing to let pretty much anybody come here, aren't we, in a dinghy? We're ignoring the fact that this is a massive national security risk. And I look at what happened in Paris today, where a man who allegedly known to authorities for having a criminal past, we've heard all this before, haven't we, wasn't deported successfully and ended up going on a mad rampage in a busy train station, stabbing 6 people while, allegedly, shouting about Allah. The danger has never truly gone away, and I think the need for vigilance will always remain high. Joining me now is international security expert Will Geddes. And Will, I was chatting to you a little bit off air. There's a lot going on at the minute, isn't there? And potentially a fair bit of it could be connected.
There's a lot of it that is all interconnected. I mean, you'd be actually surprised, and I think the general public would be hugely surprised about the connectivity. I mean, whether it be that you've got individuals that are Iranian nationals, like yesterday, who was a 23-year-old individual, I think it was 23 or 32, my dyslexia is always a bit of a challenge, who was arrested by authorities trying to plan a bioweapon attack, and he was going to do it in the name of ISIS. Then, coincidentally, we have this issue a couple of days ago, obviously, where the Counter-Terrorism Police and Border Force very successfully intercepted, obviously, some trace elements of uranium coming into the United Kingdom. We have the Gare du Nord situation. We have also the issue of a lot of that surplus weaponry that was left and abandoned in Afghanistan, which is being sold by the Taliban to Iran, and Iran selling it to Russia to assist them in the conflict in the Ukraine. So you have interconnectivity with all these groups. You have Boko Haram in West Africa, who are now being taken over by Islamic State. And so you've now got this issue there where Islamic State is joining up, as we've seen before, with Al-Qaeda and various other terrorist groups. And again, Al-Qaeda tying themselves in with various different sort of terrorism groups right across, Al-Shabaab being one, that was the name that was escaping me, in all parts of the world. So the problem, as you rightly say, has never gone away. Are we sleepwalking into an attack? No, we're not. Those that are responsible for our safety when we're fast asleep at night, those within the security services, those within counter-terrorism policing, those within the SIS, MI6, they're all working round the clock to make sure that we are intercepting those problems as best they possibly can before they materialise.
Just talk to me a little bit about some of the theories when it comes to what's been going on at like Heathrow Airport. Now, I read initially with a lot of interest this uranium issue and thought, I don't think everything meets the eye here. What do you think about it?
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same. I mean, my feeling on this, and I'm surprised none of the other security pundits out there have picked this up. My feeling is because it was very, very, very small trace amounts that were sent through and dispatched from Pakistan via Oman here to the United Kingdom, that no one's picked up on the fact that this looks like a dummy run, a trial run. Now, this is not uncommon for terrorists to try a dummy run, whether it be a hostile reconnaissance on a target they're looking to attack, or whether it be getting contraband weaponry or component parts that could make up part of a dirty bomb into a particular location or country. Now, the small parts of the trace elements of uranium, again, we don't know because the counterterrorism police are keeping their cards close to their chest, understandably, whether it's enriched or unenriched. And if it's unenriched, that's the kind of component that you would use within, say, a nuclear power factory.
Yeah.
Enriched is the type that you would use as an isotope in a dirty bomb. So what I think we can take reassurance by, and the general public can feel reassured by, is the fact that our capability, our technology, has really come a long way down the line to being able to detect even the smallest amounts.
OK, so that was it. I mean, the reassuring thing is that it appears to have been picked up.
Yeah,
OK, and that is absolutely the main thing. When it comes to this ISIS video that has resurfaced now, London coming soon, I can remember in 2017, these videos are happening all the time. When I was working at a different outlet, actually, a couple of reporters there, along with myself, intercepted one that was coming through about Antwerp, and that got reported to police, and that ended up getting stopped there. Do you think that we've taken our eye off the ball slightly as the public, not necessarily in our security services, but I just wonder whether or not the British public have not been as vigilant as maybe they should be?
Well, it's a difficult one to strike in terms of balance, Patrick. I mean, if people like me, security cronies, rattle on and on and on about the terrorism threat, people become deaf to it. They become numb to it, and they don't become vigilant. So in the same way as threat levels, if they're used in an appropriate fashion by raising them and lowering them at appropriate times,
I get that.
This also draws the general public's consciousness to it.
Now, talking of people's consciousness being drawn to something, I mean, the Taliban didn't exactly need any help being a hateful bunch of so-and-sos, but I couldn't help but notice as well that Prince Harry appears to have just stoked the fires yet again. Now, I am not certainly saying that I think Prince Harry, definitively will cause anything by this. I think he's been very stupid, and I am afraid, I can see a situation where some nutter overhead names Prince Harry as the reason why he goes and does something stupid, and I'm concerned about that.
No, and I think rightly so. I mean, he's talking about the context of him raising the point of his body count, or his kill count, if you like, in Afghanistan. And bearing in mind he was in service for 10 years, and he was in theatre, I can't remember how many tours that he actually did down in Afghanistan. But in terms of a kill count, this is something that people who have been in that position or that situation or that experience do not discuss outside of their close circle. Rarely will they even discuss it with their partners. So whether he's saying, well, actually, the papers took it out of context, a lot of veterans that I know are incredibly incensed by the fact that he's even raised it. There's no point to raising it. You want to talk about operations.
He says to get it off his own. I have actually read the passage in the book, and he says, oh, well, he was doing it to try to, highlight the fact that so many veterans unfortunately commit suicide. But that's not obvious from reading that at all. It's just not obvious.
No, exactly. And I think him rattling on about it, I don't know whether it's an act of bravado, whether it's his ghostwriter, but, some people are saying maybe they attribute the responsibility to his ghostwriter. But, he should have read the whole thing and proofed everything to make sure that, he censor-checked it.
Just lastly, quickly, Shamima Begum on the BBC. I mean, that's a daytime show you never thought you'd hear, isn't it? I'm Not a Monster, the Shamima Begum story. Do you think the public interest angle on it? I absolutely get. I am interested in what she's got to say. Yeah, I am.
Really?
I am. I understand the public interest in hearing from Shamima Begum. I still, however, do not think that legitimises the BBC helping her rehabilitate her public image.
I agree entirely. I think, where that 10-part series could have been better spent in terms of a taxpayer's money, would have been maybe interviewing her family to talk about how her family were affected by her going off and by them being vilified probably in their community. I think that would have served a far greater and beneficial purpose with the general public, because then they would see, certainly in terms of their children, maybe they would look inwardly a little bit more if they have someone. What were the indicators? What were the signs of that child becoming radicalised?
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't give a hoot what Shamima has to say.
No.
She said everything I need to hear.
Yes.
And even now, I hope she rots in a Syrian refugee camp.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that's a bit harsh, but
it's not
that's my
harsh.
stance.
You should hear some of the things I say about when I'm not on air. Well, thank you very much. Will Getty's own international security expert, covering a wide range of topics there for us. Coming up, we're going to hear your thoughts on all of this. And a school in Lewisham have scrapped their name, Francis Drake, because of his links to the slave trade, despite the fact that he did loads of other stuff as well, like, defeat the Armada. Anyway, journalist and former MEP Patrick O'Flynn joins us for a bit of a history lesson, maybe the likes of which the kids at that school could learn from. Plus, Britain suffered 50,000 excess deaths last year. 50,000. And we're going to hear from the Spectator's data editor, Michael Simmons, on this a little bit later on. You will not want to miss that, so don't you dare move.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. Now, before the break, I was raising my own personal concerns about the terror threats facing this country. It's in light of a few different things. An ISIS video has resurfaced in which they appear to say that they are, quotes, coming soon to London. Prince Harry, of course, doing his best to enrage the Taliban. Cheers, Hazza. And Shamima Begum as well, desperately trying to get back into the UK. And the BBC doing all they can to rehabilitate her public image, thanks to a 10-part podcast. Loads of you have been getting in touch on this. GBviews at gbnews.uk, including James. James says it's scary watching your grandkids going out today. James, I just can't help but feel as though we're not helping ourselves. And this was probably my overarching point, which is that when you add all of this up, as well as what's been going on in the channel and all of this stuff, we don't know who a lot of these people are coming here. Why on earth are we doing our best, it would seem, in my view anyway, to try to make ourselves less safe? It's like national self-harm. Anyway, we've got Zero. Oh, there you go. Says, feels like everything is collapsing. How can one feel safe? Yeah, there is just a little bit of a sense in the air, isn't there? And I look across at what's been happening in France. Paris has really started to kick off again recently. We had a terror attack there, but it used to be a far-right terror attack in the Kurdish area. That was followed by an incident today. It's all alleged what happened today, although, to be honest with you, some quite good sources are saying that a chap was shouting about Allah and stabbing people in a train station, so read into that what you will. Constantine says, what do you think? We can only rely on ourselves nowadays. The cops are pointless. Well, I don't know if that's particularly true, Constantine. I absolutely take your point, though, but the only reason I would say it's not true is that I think we would be utterly, utterly terrified if we knew the true extent of the terror attacks that our brilliant intelligence services stop. We don't hear about a lot of them for good reason. I did think it was fascinating, though, wasn't it, to have international security expert Will Geddes on earlier, who I think was saying what we were all thinking, or a lot of us were thinking, about this Iranian uranium, it rolls off the tongue, which rocked up at Heathrow Airport yesterday, didn't it? I think it looks a little bit like a dry run. And George here saying something, again, that I think we're all thinking, certainly for those of us who do live in our capital city. He says, I feel increasingly unsafe, particularly in London. I hate to say it, but I can't help but feel as though there's just something in the air at the minute. Anyway, I hope I'm wrong, of course. Moving on from that, today, news that Sir Francis Drake Primary School will be changing its name to Twin Oaks Primary School. I mean, it makes you proud to be British, doesn't it? Nothing makes you think of Great Britain than Twin Oaks. This comes after a poll was conducted with 88% of 450 parents, staff, pupils and local residents voting in favour of a new name. You know, this was actually an episode of Waterloo Road. You know the series Waterloo Road? They did this on Waterloo Road. It's not a sitcom, it's not a drama, no, this is real life. The wokies have gone absolutely mental. The poll was prompted after BLM protesters called into question Drake's connection to the slave trade. Now, let's just have a few things right about Drake, OK? Drake is primarily remembered for, and crucially here, defeating the Spanish Armada's invasion of England in 1588. But he drifted into piracy and did own slaves. Head teacher of the school, Karen Cartwright, had this to say: the slave trade links associated with the current name sat at odds with the values of our school. Can I just say, one would assume, just because the school is called Sir Francis Drake School, I don't think anyone thinks that the values of that school would imply that it supports slavery. I mean, that would be weird, wouldn't it? This story caused outrage on Twitter, with many prominent historians and figures calling this choice a lack of historical knowledge and context. In fact, the BBC are copying it a bit on the show so far, aren't they? The BBC reported this story on their Twitter, renaming Drake, basically just saying slave trader Sir Francis Drake. So that's it. So Sir Francis Drake is just now the slave trader. Not the guy who literally saved England from the Spanish. No, not at all. Historian Professor Robert Toombs told Mail Online, naming a school after him does not mean being in favour of slavery. That would be absurd. Drake is remembered for helping to save England from a terrible invasion. Rather than using his name to teach his pupils valuable lessons about the past, they've opted for a bland and meaningless alternative that cuts it off from history. Tory MP Alexander Stafford called this cultural vandalism. So, does this just define Drake now? Do none of his other achievements matter? Do we just know George Orwell as some kind of homophobe? Or remember Churchill as just, I don't know, a rampant alcoholic? Here to discuss this eroding of history is the journalist and former MEP Patrick O'Flynn, who's weighed in on this debate on Twitter. Patrick, thank you very much. I'll throw it over to you. I mean, it makes you proud to be British, doesn't it? I can't wait for my kids to go to Twin Oaks School.
Yeah, well, when I was of primary school age, most boys that I knew got their basics from history, not just from the primary school, but from this series here. I'm holding up a Ladybird history, if the viewers can see it, if I can get it out. Anyway, this one's on Elizabeth I, and it includes several screeds about Francis Drake. In fact, I'll read you the first
I'm enjoying
this.
It's like an actual history.
The reign of Elizabeth was a time for adventurous deeds at sea. Of all the men who sailed from our shores into unknown seas, the greatest was Sir Francis Drake, right? Now, I think our primary school pupils should be learning a bit of that, and the school should get the Ladybird histories back in. But what I'm particularly worried about is this apparently was some kind of quasi-democratic decision. The critical weight of opinion at this school in Deptford in southeast London among the parents, the pupils, the staff, of course, left-wing teachers in inner London, was to drop the name of one of our great heroes. And my particular point is that this is an authentic reflection of what's happening in London and with the London population now. And part of it's huge demographic change, mass immigration without any integration, no pride in our national story. And I blame cultural and social conservatives, dare I say it, probably like us, and particularly the Conservative Party in power for the last decade and more, for not taking the fight on this.
For being too scared,
restore a sense of national pride.
Yeah, I am begrudgingly inclined to agree with you. I do like to think that I try to do my bit to stop that happening every now and again, but I can see it happening left, right and centre. I mean, there was a school in Pimlico where the Union Jack was set on fire in the school by pupils, and that was just all right. In fact, I think probably the head teacher ended up apologising and replacing the Union Jack, which is where we're at now, isn't it? And I just can't help but feel as though this is pointing to something much wider, which you've alluded to, Patrick, which is the total erosion of British history, and the only elements of it that are being highlighted as well are the negative ones. I mean, what have you got to do to have a school named after you? Saving this country from the Spanish apparently is not one of them.
No, absolutely. And mark my words, if we don't, or if the Conservative Party in government doesn't take up this battle, turn the tide on this critical race theory, start teaching young people of all racial and ethnic backgrounds the pride and the great achievements of this country, Londoners, these young Londoners, will be coming for Nelson's column within 10 years' time.
Oh, Churchill will be toppled. Churchill will be toppled 100%. And I mean, there is also another irony to this, of course, which is about the Barbary slaves. I mean, there were loads of people who were basically white Europeans who were sold into slavery as well. I mean, where are our reparations? We never hear about that.
No, absolutely. And as someone of Irish Catholic heritage, if I was to obsess about the past, I would call for every statue of Oliver Cromwell to be ripped down. But the whole point is that I was brought up focusing on the country I belong to, which is England and the United Kingdom and the great achievements. We seem to be drumming it into kids from ethnic minority backgrounds these days to be resentful about the society they're growing up in, instead of to identify with it and get to a post-racial politics. And as you were alluding to earlier, the story of slavery is very, very much more complex than just the idea of white Europeans oppressing black people.
100%, but there is also another element to it, which is if you watched any advert at the moment on British television, or you walked into various different institutions and you saw the amount of virtue signalling going on, you would be forgiven for thinking that every other person that you walked past in the street was a member of the LGBTQ plus community, trans or whatever. You would be forgiven for thinking that the vast majority of people in this country were not, in fact, ethnic minorities. They were now the ethnic majorities. You would be forgiven for thinking that if you just turned your TV on and saw the adverts. Why on earth are we, do you think, not proud about our own culture, enforcing our own culture? Instead, we're so apologetic about it.
Well, I think it's very much to do with London being so predominant in the UK, the centre of finance, politics, media, 7 or 8 times as big as the next big city, the centre, the volume and the voice of London, and an enormous hotbed for immigration. So, most people working in London, growing up in London, were not born in London, were not even born in England, so it's a completely different place. And yet the people working in media, particularly in the BBC in London, think the whole country is like London. And that's why you get this over predominance of tiny minorities.
It's the creation of this completely fake narrative, like I've said there, about the demographics of this country, whether that's in an ethnic sense or whether it's in a sexual orientation sense. At the same time, so simultaneously, the total desecration of our actual history and a relentless desire to focus only on the negatives, which absolutely makes my mind boggle. Patrick, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Patrick O'Flynn there, former Brexit Party MEP, political commentator as well. Next Next up, I have the one and only Michael Simmons, data editor of The Spectator, on the 50,000 excess deaths recorded in the UK in 2022. Why do you think that might be, people? We'll get stuck into the meat and bones of that, and afterwards, the great Zoe Strimple from The Telegraph on the Prime Minister's plan to make all children study maths until they're 18. I just thought he was a big swatty nerd that might have got bullied at school and frankly looked a lot like Will from The Inbetweeners. But I'm told that maybe I'm wrong. Potentially, it's all a charade for the inevitable takeover of the Chinese Communist Party. And of course, the chance to give me a right good pummeling, people. GBViews at gbnews.uk. You can ask me anything. I promise to answer it. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Do you remember the days of lockdown? I certainly do. Every night on the TV, especially the BBC News, the country was shown a rather shocking-looking graph which displayed the huge number of excess deaths caused by COVID-19, supposedly. Just to recap, excess deaths are any deaths that exceed what is statistically expected. So, if we take an average number of deaths based on the preceding 5 years, but the current numbers exceed it, those numbers will be called excess deaths. You all with me? Yeah, cool. Right. Well, what if I was telling you that in 2022, Britain had an average of roughly 1,000 excess deaths per week? Yes, about 50,000 in total. And then, what if I told you that only a small minority of those were COVID deaths? So, then naturally the question is, what's actually causing all of these excess deaths? A report late last year found that 30,000 people have needlessly died from heart disease since the beginning of the pandemic. Perhaps the vast backlogs that emerged from the pandemic are playing their role. Evidence may also suggest ambulance waiting times are contributing too. But one thing seems clear to me. All roads lead back to lockdown. For a long time, this story was ignored, but this show pursued and scrutinised it relentlessly. One other man who examined this story more than most was Michael Simmers, the data editor at The Spectator. Thank you very, very much, Michael. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show, may I say. Just talk us through what some of these findings are and what they mean to you. Is this the cost of lockdown, in your view?
Thanks for having me on. I would say absolutely this is the cost of lockdown. So as you mentioned, every week the Office for National Statistics publishes death figures for the country, and they'll sometimes split that by cause, COVID and other causes. And as you mentioned in the introduction, if that goes above the average that we saw before the pandemic, that's an excess death. And what's been found now that we have all of the data for last year is that there's about 50,000 more than average, and that's the highest excess deaths apart from the pandemic we've seen since about 1951. And if we look at the causes, a lot of it is, or rather a very small portion of it is COVID, and other parts that look like there's a big increase in heart deaths. I know you mentioned the British Heart Foundation report that found that 30,000 deaths happened needlessly because perhaps of missed appointments. One thing we calculated in the Spectator data team is that during lockdowns, there was about 8 million missed appointments. And we now know that the NHS waiting lists are at record high. So it looks like a lot of health problems that people would have had just normally in a normal year during the pandemic didn't get treated. And then that's coming back to bite them and us now.
And how does this compare to the amount of people who were dying excess deaths-wise during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, during lockdown? So the reason why we locked down, to try to limit these excess deaths, how does it relate to those numbers there? Because I was saying at the time, in my view, I think that more people might end up dying, sadly, as a result of our response to COVID than maybe COVID itself. Was that way off the mark?
So in terms of just pure excess deaths, there were more excess deaths during the lockdowns because you, of course, had all these heart and cancer deaths plus the COVID deaths. Now, we're certainly seeing in some weeks of last year, there was more deaths from all these other causes than there were in the COVID weeks. I would say that it's probably too early to say, was there more COVID or was there more lockdown-caused deaths? Because, of course, the people that are going to die because they missed treatments during lockdown haven't all died yet. There will still be people on the NHS waiting list waiting for treatment who need ambulances because of these backlogs that are sadly going to die. So the number is going to mount. And it's certainly something, that we need to keep looking at, that what is going to be the true cost of lockdown.
Absolutely. But please tell me that the government is investigating this, because I really hope that when the dust all settles, some people can at least be held to account.
Well, you would absolutely hope that the government was investigating this. And when I started writing about this in the summer, that was sort of the impression I had, that it was being investigated. But I spoke to the Department for Health today, and they said that there was no formal investigation, just that the situation was being monitored. And it's certainly true to say that they do have very good monitoring tools, but people that I've spoke to, senior in government, just don't seem to be aware of these monitoring tools. So I certainly think a proper investigation is needed, and that should definitely form part of the COVID inquiry that's going to kick off this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, given that we are still waiting for this to work its way through the system, COVID is still a thing, of course. It is still affecting people. And as you've rightly pointed out, all of the people who are yet to die as a response to our coronavirus crisis, i.e. the lockdowns, well, they've not died yet, have they? Or they've not had their medical conditions. The NHS is still on its knees, partly as a result of all of this. Do you think that if we look at these things side by side again now, if anything like this ever happens again, that the public should be given almost like the trade-off? So instead of just Whitty's graphs and next slide, please, of this is the consequence of what might happen if we let COVID rip, now we have a little bit of data, don't we, to imply what could happen if we, did let it rip, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, during COVID, certainly the first lockdown, it was all focused on that one issue. And the public should be made more aware of the trade-offs. And in fairness to Chris Whitty, he did recently publish a paper where I think he made this point himself, that some of the trade-offs could have been better communicated so that people can make better choices, or just not necessarily better choices, but just more informed choices, knowing that there are costs to both sides.
Do you think this was deliberately underreported at the time because people didn't want to get in the way of lockdown?
I wouldn't say it was unreported because the ONS, published this every week, so the data was there for people to look at. But maybe the government could have had a clearer eye on it and had, look for it. You certainly, you speak to people in government who are even now seem unaware that this is going on. So maybe it wasn't so much unreported, but people didn't want to know about it.
Yeah, I think that's the key point, isn't it? People didn't really want to know. It didn't suit a lot of the narrative at the time. Michael, really appreciate you making the time for us this evening. Michael Simmons there, the data editor at The Spectator. Make sure you always check him out online as well, on Twitter, on social media. He's always got a load of great research. Right, now, coming up, has our Prime Minister gone mad for maths? My next guest reckons that his new plans don't consider the variety of this great country, maybe more creative things this country has to offer. Telegraph and Spectator columnist Zoe Strimple is right here in the studio with me. We'll be going to Zoe very shortly. Plus, your favourite part of the show, yes, it's the bit I'm contractually obliged to say, you get to give me a right good pummeling. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Ask me anything, I'll answer it. I'll see you in a minute.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
All right, how many of us have ever walked into a room of computer programmers, hacking away at their keyboards there, shaking from bottle after bottle of Monster Energy drink and thought, gosh, this country, we need more of these guys? Because for all we bang on about diversity, there's not a great deal of it in Rishi's plan to force maths onto everyone until the age of 18, is there? What happened to different skill sets, different talents, and different interests? Or everyone having something unique to bring to the table, or dare I say it, a bit of creativity. Without a doubt, maths will probably help you get a job with a decent pay packet. No doubt about that, not knocking it at all. Rishi might have found deep meaning in his time as an analyst for an investment bank, but we don't all want to be finance bros banging on about Forex trading in a Clapham wine bar now, do we? Is this really the future? Because to be honest with you, if it is the future, just strap me to one of those SpaceX rockets and just jettison me off into the stratosphere. I would much rather, for example, be one of my lucky producers. Who writes this? One of my lucky producers, helping to bring you, treasured viewer, the news that you won't get anywhere else. Sunday Telegraph and Spectator columnist Zoe Strimple, who joins us now, saw something out of the communist playbook in this Rishi Sunak big maths agenda, didn't you?
Okay, I mean, the idea of, okay, yes, there's something, we've got to take that
you were being a bit
headline.
Yeah.
Let's be, yeah, I mean, so there are some important points here, though, and I think the reaction I had to this article is interesting because I got monstered by people who were just very, very, very angry at what they thought I was saying. Chinese Communist Party, to be honest, has much worse stuff that it's imposing on people than just forced math.
Yes.
But the point is, we live in an age in which anyone can access a calculator, anyone can access maths, like calculating machines, better than any human practically by just literally putting something into the internet.
Exactly.
If you need to know the answer to something mathematical, you can find it without having to learn all that stuff yourself. If you want to learn the stuff yourself, then that's great. And I'm actually jealous of you because numeracy stands everyone in way better stead than being good at English literature.
I'm with you on that. I'm terrible at maths. Yeah.
So I think there's that. So I think that's the age we're in, like in terms of that it's okay. Yes, knowing what questions to ask, a little bit more of an issue. But when I think back, I'm one of those people who's bad at maths. And it was torture being forced to learn. It was really difficult. I enjoyed it, but it took about 10 times longer than most other people. I would say in current parlance, I probably had some sort of learning
I agree. I'm the same.
Right. But that said, I'm very grateful for what I learned between the ages of 5 and 10 because percentages, fractions, arithmetic, times tables,
the basics,
really, really useful. That does come in handy. Everything else, just unpleasant.
Look, I agree with you. I was very fortunate in my schooling. I had fantastic teachers and I had fantastic classmates a lot of the time, of course. But I was absolutely shocking at maths. I was in set 9 out of 9. I was in set 4 out of 4 the year before that. And I actually think if I'd have had to have persisted with maths all the way through to the age of 18, it would have genuinely been bad for my mental health.
Right. Well, I mean, I think we have the responsibility as, well, at least I do, as slightly older, to not fall into this thing about everything's about mental health.
No.
Yeah, things can suck and be embarrassing, fine. But, I mean, and be difficult. That is what school, unfortunately, imposes on people, and I suppose it's a useful life lesson. But I grew up in the States, as you might be on my accent, and there you do have to take math for the whole time. But I came here for A-levels, gratefully dropped it, then thought I might return to the US. When it turned out that I would have had to take physics, calculus, all these things until the second, I just thought, I literally, this will ruin my life for the next few years. I don't have the time, and I quit it. It just, I was like, no, I'm going to do the English system. Because you can't, and the other thing, there's a final point to make, is that back to this kind of idea of individualism, I think we are getting to this place where we are overly worshipping school and what school should be, or rather we are overly endowing school with what it's supposed to do. And that goes for all things like, mental health of the students and like every single aspect of life is now being outsourced to schools. We don't give anyone any chance to kind of just figure stuff out for themselves.
Well, I agree with you on that, I completely, and I hope I didn't come across as too much of a snowflake when I said me doing maths for the next couple of years would have been damaging for mental health. Of course, I would have done it, but I don't think I would have necessarily gained anything out of it.
Wouldn't.
At all.
You definitely
And neither would the teachers, by the way. They'd have hated it as much as I did because I wasn't there to learn and wouldn't have wanted to learn at that particular moment in time. But when I look around at this country now, we've got... It's never anyone's responsibility for anything. So it's apart from the schools, really. So it's the school's responsibility to be mum and dad to kids, or whatever permutation of that, of course, they want these days. It's a responsibility to be like mental health care workers as well. It's obviously a responsibility to teach them, the responsibility to maybe, and they would see it, educate them politically about a variety of different left-wing bonkers ideologies. And all of a sudden we create a generation of children who cannot look after themselves and just roll over and, roll over on their backs and throw their limbs in the air whenever anything gets tough. And that's, I think, where we are now.
Possibly. And I think just to take, I agree with that completely. I think just to take it back to the maths thing, it's really interesting. This idea that Rishi said, well, all these jobs today are really data-driven and students need all that stuff. When people are motivated because they want to earn money, they will do the work.
Yeah.
You do not need to take up taxpayer money learning things that are for 5 years ahead.
But also, where's the imagination in all of this? Is this the best that Britain has got? Just from a purely policy perspective, I think it's naff. Because is this the best idea? Right, maths, that's it. We've got these people who are going to go into some kind of finance job or whatever. No, I'm not knocking finance jobs. That is tremendous. And I'm probably, deep down, really, a bit jealous that I'm not built that way, right? I'm not wired that way. But in a country at the moment that is struggling with practical trades, we were told that we needed to import them all for however long. We've got a couple of generations now of children who had no need whatsoever to go to university and saddle themselves in a lifetime full of debt. We stigmatised practical trades and creativity, I think, for too long, didn't we? And it looks like we're just doing it again.
That sounds right to me. The only thing I would say is that it seems like he's not saying you have to do an A-level, but you could do a technical course in maths. But that's to your point. Why not encourage people to do the equivalent of a technical course, but in something else, like fixing cars or
absolutely
that would sort of be really practical in that way, and let people come to the maths later. And also this this idea that all these jobs need maths. Yes, of course, but we're also, everybody knows that. The people who aren't good at maths will either come to it on their own, or they should be encouraged to, become do philosophy, or, probably you're very good at philosophy, so you could have done that. The taxpayer might have, benefited more.
I see you've read my books. Yeah. No, not at all. I've never had a book deal. But look, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this, actually. It's been great to have you on the show, and thank you very much for imparting your wisdom and managing to ride the Twitter tirade of abuse that people were giving you as well. Take strong stuff, to be honest with you. They don't teach you that in school, do they? Anyway, now it's time.
You can't count the instances of abuse.
This is it.
So bad.
And you work out your ratio.
Yeah, I won't look at the data analytics. I don't understand them. Yeah.
That's good. Ignorance is bliss in this regard. Look, Zoe, thank you so much. Fantastic stuff. Right, OK, so it's the final time of the show. It's time for Pummel the Patrick. Yay, OK. What have you got for me today, you lovely people? Lee says, would you want to be Prime Minister? And if you were, oh gosh, what's the first thing you would do? Well, I have thought about the idea of being Prime Minister. I think we all have, let's be honest with you, at some point. I don't think I'd like all of the hassle and faff that it takes in order to get into a position of even being an MP, let alone then actually becoming Prime Minister. But in this day and age right now, I'm starting to wonder whether or not I should actively try to run to be Prime Minister, because maybe it's time for me to put my money where my mouth is. And also, if Theresa May can earn £2.5 million on the after-dinner speaking circuit after becoming Prime Minister for a brief period of time, during which she was utterly shocking, then surely I've got to be able to coin in about 10 million large, which I think is worth a couple of years of probably accidentally running this country into the ground. What's the first thing that I would do? The first thing that I would do is, and maybe this is rather predictable for a lot of people, but it is sort out immigration, and it is sort out what's going on in the Channel, and make the tough decisions that actually, frankly, we need to take. Because when you look at everything else that's at stake, not just national security, but the impact that it's having on our public services, and the impact, I would argue as well, that it's having on various different ideologies in this country, I would have no problem saying the things that I think need to be said. Sean says, he's asked me this, what's he asked me here? Can we see a quiet year ahead in the political front line? Will it be another year of pandemonium? Well, Sean, I think there has to be a happy medium here. I think we're being fundamentally let down by being in a holding pen of British politics, because nothing will be done. And in a time of crisis on multiple different fronts, we need leadership, and we're not going to get any, because we're going to end up just choosing between two very, very dull men at the next general election. Aren't we lucky? Up next is Dan Watson. Dan's here right now. Dan.
And you are the opposite of a dull man, aren't you, Patrick Christie's? No, what a strong pitch. Christie's for PM. I like it.
It's a terrifying thought, but I'm the man we need, Dan. Anyway, what have you got coming up?
Look, I am going to continue to tackle these lies and delusions from Harry that we saw overnight. I know you mentioned it briefly at the top of the show, this bizarre backtrack on the Taliban. We've got a great lineup, including Meghan McCain, who is, of course, one of the top Republican commentators in the world, and the daughter of John McCain.
Oh my gosh, fantastic stuff. Dan Watson, I don't know why I would expect anything less. Lovely to see you as ever. Make sure you don't move at all because the wonderful Dan Watson, the man, let's be honest, you've all come to see, is here right now.
Hi there, Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. It's going to be cold tonight in northern Scotland, but elsewhere across the UK, more wet and windy weather on the way. Wettest in South Wales, where of course it's been so wet so far this year. There are more weather fronts coming in, bringing bouts of rainfall that will be persistent across parts of Wales and southwest England through the night, but there'll be some wetter weather elsewhere, the rain pushing into Northern Ireland as well as Northern England, southern Scotland during the evening. But really, it's heaviest and most persistent over the Brecon Beacons, over Exmoor, and that's falling onto saturated ground, and so there'll be further issues with flooding, I think, by the morning. Accompanied by a strong wind, that wind coming from the southwest, gales in places, 12 Celsius though in the south, whilst it's clear, calmer and frosty for northern Scotland, -3 or -4 Celsius first thing. Then an area of rain moves into Scotland, northern England, Northern Ireland. As it bumps into the cold air, we can expect some snow above 400 or 500 metres for central and northern Scotland. The rain elsewhere replaced by showers. It's staying blustery through Thursday, but the gales ease, and the showers will be interspersed by some brighter spells. However, it turns increasingly windy for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland as we end Thursday. Gales or severe gales for the Northern Irish coast, pushing into Western Scotland and then the Irish Sea coast during the hours of darkness. And the early hours of Friday will see rain replaced by showers, a blustery night, but with the wind, of course, temperatures will stay above frost levels for most. 8 Celsius in the south, 3 or 4 in the north. A bright start, despite it being a bit colder in the south compared with Thursday morning. And it looks like there'll be sunny spells coming through by Friday afternoon across much of England, Wales, eastern Scotland, Northern Ireland eventually. But there'll be further showers, especially for western Scotland, northwest England and parts of Wales. Now into the weekend, rain on Saturday will be replaced by showers on Sunday and it'll turn colder.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, Mr. Accountability Prince Harry has gone off the deep end, denying his own dangerous Taliban kill count revelation and blaming, guess who, for inventing the justified outrage.
Text is everything, and unfortunately, due to those leaks, the British press intentionally chose to strip